They sold the little puppy. And what his mum did will break your heart. In a quiet corner of regional New South Wales, where the air smells of eucalyptus after a dry spell and dogs wander lazily through dusty yards, lived Shirley. She was a woman getting on in years, with hair as white as saltbush and eyes as hard as ironbark. She was never one for affection, not even when her husband was alive. Since he passed, it felt like her world had been slowly closing in. The debts, the pension that was never enough, and a small farm that was producing less wool and more worries with every passing year. In her dusty yard lived Rosie, a honey-colored golden retriever with a sweet gaze and a gentle way about her. She wasn't Shirley's pet out of love, but because someone had given her as a gift years ago. And well, you couldn't just give her back, Shirley would say, but Rosie, without anyone asking a thing of her, became a guardian, a companion, and a loyal silence. She never made a fuss, never asked for anything. She'd just lie in the shade of the old gum tree, watching the galahs fly past. A couple of months ago, Rosie had a litter of puppies, but they didn't survive the harsh cold snap. All but one, Max. The only one left was a curious little pup with chubby paws and a bright spark in his eyes. He stuck to Rosie like her shadow. Wherever she went, he was there, tripping over his own feet, but happy. And even though Rosie wasn't a young dog anymore, she played with him as if time had given her a little piece of her youth back. Sometimes in the early morning, you could see them sleeping, snuggled together under an old plaid blanket someone had left by the fence. Rosie would lick his head with the kind of patience only mothers understand. He was her only son, her only reason. But to Shirley, Max wasn't a son, or even a joy. He was an opportunity. A friend of hers, Barb, had told her a few days earlier, "Listen, Shirley, purebred retrievers sell well. You could get a few good bucks for him. You know, especially when they're little." Shirley mulled it over. The following Sunday, after checking her accounts and looking at her nearly empty purse, she made a decision. She didn't tell a soul, least of all Rosie. On Monday morning, the sun was already beating down. Rosie was playing with Max, nudging him gently with her nose while he tried to climb all over her. They were laughing without a sound, understanding each other without words. That's when Jess arrived, a young woman in her 30s, dressed in activewear and driving a new SUV. She was a distant friend of Shirley's daughter and had heard there was a puppy for sale. She had a few folded notes in her back pocket and an excited heart. She wasn't just looking for a pet, she was trying to fill a hole in her life she couldn't even name. "Is this him?" she asked, pointing at Max with a tender smile. "Yes, that's the one," Shirley said, dusting off her apron. "He's a good breed, won't give you any trouble. But I need the cash up front." "Eh?" Jess pulled out the bills without another question. Rosie, who at first didn't understand, soon felt the air change. She took a step forward, then another, her gaze fixed on Jess, then on Max, and then the inevitable happened. Max was lifted into Jess's arms. He let out a small whimper, as if asking what was going on. Rosie whined softly at first. Then with more intensity, she ran to the farm gate. She stood on her hind legs. Her breathing became ragged. Tears started to stream from her eyes, down her snout, as if her body couldn't bear the thought. He was her only son, her only pup, and they were taking him away for a handful of cash. Max looked at her from Jess's arms, stretched out a paw, and whimpered again, but no one understood him. Only his mum. Rosie pushed at the gate, growled, and threw herself onto the ground. As soon as she saw the car door open, she panicked. Jess tried to comfort the puppy, but he wouldn't stop trembling. Shirley, stern as ever, just said, "That's life, love, can't have everything," and the car started. Rosie ran after it for a few meters, then stopped. There, in the middle of the dirt track, she stood with her head bowed, her body shaking, and her eyes empty. That night, she didn't lie under the gum tree. She didn't eat, she didn't bark, she just stared at the gate and waited. But Max was gone. The drive back to the city was silent. Jess tried to put on some soft music, but Max was inconsolable. He was curled up in a ball, his little ears drooping, his eyes glued to the window as if he could still see his mum's shape running after them. "It's all going to be okay, little guy," Jess murmured as she drove. "You'll see, you're going to be so happy with me." But Max didn't respond. He just snuggled deeper, as if he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. When they arrived at her place, a neat house with white walls and a tidy garden, Jess gently lowered Max onto the lawn and knelt in front of him. "Look, this is your new home. You've got your own bed, toys, fresh water, everything you need." Max sniffed the ground, took a few shaky steps, and looked around. The air smelled different. Everything was new, but his mum wasn't there. Inside the house, Jess had set up a little corner with a soft bed, a blanket, and even a squeaky toy shaped like a bone. But Max wanted none of it. He walked slowly to a corner, curled himself into a tight ball, and closed his eyes. That night, he didn't eat, or bark, or play. Jess grew worried. She put some chicken on top of his food. Nothing. She tried to pat him. He barely lifted his head. "Oh, Max, what did they do to you, little one?" What Jess didn't know was that they hadn't just done something to Max. They had ripped his world away. And for a puppy that small, that hurts more than any physical blow. Meanwhile, back at the farm, Rosie's gaze was still fixed on the gate. The sun had set, and the shadows stretched like sad arms across the dirt. But she didn't move. Kev, a neighbor who sometimes dropped off fresh bread, saw her there, still as a statue. "What's wrong with the dog?" he asked Shirley. "Nothing. Her pup's gone and she's feeling a bit down. She'll get over it," Shirley said, not looking up from her knitting. But she didn't get over it. Rosie roamed every corner of the yard, sniffing every spot where Max used to play. She crawled under the old blanket where they used to sleep together and smelled the empty space. She let out a soft, low whine, almost like a long sigh. Then she went out into the yard and stared at the sky. 3, 4, 5 days went by, and every day, Max refused to play, and Rosie refused to eat. Jess tried everything. She bought special gourmet kibble. She brought him new balls, even a small sandpit in case he liked to dig. But Max remained withdrawn. Sometimes he'd cry in the night, other times he'd scratch at the front door. One day, while Jess was tidying the garden, she heard a soft sound, like a long, mournful whimper. She peered around the corner and saw him there, head low and ears down, staring intently at the street. It was as if he expected a familiar figure to appear at any moment and call his name. "You miss her that much, don't you, little fella?" Jess said, crouching beside him. She never knew it could hurt this much, not even in animals. Jess, without knowing why, felt a lump in her throat. She had never seen such a small puppy with so much sadness. And then she did something she hadn't expected to do. She picked up her phone, found the number Shirley's daughter had given her, and called. "Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Shirley?" "Yes. Who's calling?" "It's Jess, the one who bought the puppy. Max." "Oh, right. What's wrong? Is he giving you trouble already?" "No, it's not that. It's just," she paused, took a deep breath. "Your dog, Max's mum, is she still there?" "Yeah, the silly thing's still around. All skinny and sad, as if someone died." Jess's heart tightened. "Do you think I could see her?" "See her? What for?" "I don't know. I just feel like the puppy needs her." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a dry chuckle. "Oh, love, if every whinging animal came with a money-back guarantee, I'd be a rich woman by now." And she hung up. That night, Jess sat on her bed with Max beside her. She wrapped him in a blanket and just looked at him. "I don't know what to do, my boy, but I promise you this. I'm not going to leave you alone." Max looked at her for a moment, then lowered his head and sighed. Back at the farm, Rosie was still waiting. Every noise, every shadow, every car that passed made her run to the gate. And every time, she returned with her head hung lower. But something was about to change. The sun had grown weaker. It no longer streamed through the gaps in the farm's wooden fences. Rosie would get up each morning, walk slowly to the gate, and sit down to wait. But now, she wasn't just waiting, she was planning. Shirley had started leaving the gate unlatched some afternoons, tired of hearing the dog scratch at the wire and howl softly, as if she were talking to the wind. "Even people don't carry on like that. For crying out loud," she grumbled as she wrapped a shawl around herself. One of those afternoons, while the old woman was dozing in her wicker chair, Rosie slipped through the gate. For the first time since Max left, she didn't run. She walked with the quiet determination of someone who knows the world is against them. But they can't stop. She sniffed the air, circled once on the dusty ground, and then simply left the property. Jess had decided to work from home so she wouldn't have to leave Max alone. She would constantly go out to the garden, pick him up, walk him around the house. Nothing worked. The little pup only ate when he was starving and would play with his toy for just a few seconds before looking back at the door. That morning, Jess woke up with a decision lodged in her throat. "I'm taking him to see her. Just to see her." She put Max in a travel crate, prepared the car, and just as she was about to start the engine, her phone rang. It was work, an unexpected meeting. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, sighing. She turned off the car and went back inside. Max whimpered when he saw they were returning to the house. "I swear, tomorrow, mate, we'll go tomorrow." But tomorrow would be too late. Rosie was following her instinct. She couldn't read maps or recognize street signs, but something deep inside her was telling her which way to go. She cut through paddocks, crossed dry creek beds, and hid when cars went by. She walked under the blistering sun and through the light drizzle that suddenly began to fall. A full day passed, then another. Her legs were starting to tremble, but her heart was still strong, filled with one single thing: Max. That night, Jess dreamt that Max ran out onto the street and disappeared. She woke up in a sweat, got out of bed, and went to where the puppy was sleeping. She found him sitting up, his gaze fixed on the window. It was as if he knew something was close. And it was, on the other side of the city, near a milk bar that sold pies and glass bottles of Coke. A thin, drenched figure was dragging itself onto the pavement. It was Rosie. She couldn't go on. She collapsed under a tree, her paws covered in mud, her mouth dry, and her eyes half closed. A young man passing on his bike stopped when he saw her. "Hey, girl, what are you doing out here? So far from home?" He crouched down. He saw she had an old collar with a metal tag, almost completely worn down. With difficulty, he managed to read an address. The Wattle Farm, near Bathurst. He pulled out his phone and looked up the location. "You're a long way off. Girl, you're lost." Rosie looked at him, then lowered her head. He called a mate who had a car, and together they carefully lifted her in. "Maybe someone's looking for her. At the very least, we can give her some food and water." What they didn't know was that she wasn't lost. She was looking for someone. At home, Jess was opening her laptop when she received an unexpected Facebook message. "Hi, are you the owner of this golden retriever puppy? I got your contact from a rescue group. I think I have his mum." Her heart jumped into her throat. She opened the photo, and there she was, thin, dirty, but with those same eyes Jess recognized instantly. It was her, Rosie. Jess grabbed her keys. Max looked at her, suddenly alert, as if he had sensed it. Jess picked him up, her hands shaking. "You'll see, my love. I'm going to bring her to you. No matter what." At that moment, in a mechanic's workshop where the young man had left Rosie to dry off and rest, she lifted her head. The air smelled different. It smelled of home, of hope, of Max. She had done the impossible. And the story was just beginning. Jess's SUV flew over the country roads as if time was slipping through her fingers. Her heart was racing, a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. Max, in his crate on the back seat, didn't move, but something in his breathing had changed. It was faster, as if a premonition was stirring inside him. "We're almost there, little guy. We're going to get your mum," Jess said, gripping the steering wheel. "Just hang on tight. We're not giving up." The young man who found Rosie had sent the exact location, a workshop on the outskirts of town, hidden among sheds and piles of old tires. When Jess arrived, the air smelled of burnt oil and the sky was beginning to turn orange. She got out of the car and looked towards the back of the workshop. And then she saw her. Rosie was lying on an old rag with a bowl of water beside her. Her ears were down and her body was weary. But as soon as she sensed the car, she lifted her head sharply. She sniffed the air, and her tail began to wag. "Max," Jess said, turning to the car and opening the back door. "She's here." Max peeked out. His paws trembled a little as they touched the ground. He sniffed the air too. And then suddenly, as if pushed by something inside him, he started to walk, slowly at first, then faster. Rosie stood up. Her eyes went wide. She took 2 steps, and when he was just a few meters away, she ran towards him with all her strength. Max ran too. The gravel crunched under his little paws. And then, finally, they met. But Max didn't recognize her. For a split second, Rosie stopped, panting, centimeters from him. She sniffed him, licked him, but Max, confused, took a step back. His little eyes looked at her with doubt, as if something felt familiar but he couldn't quite place it. Rosie whimpered. She licked him again, desperately, nudging his face with her nose. She circled his body with her own and let out a soft, anguished howl. Jess felt something inside her break. "Go on, Max. It's your mum," she whispered, crouching beside them. But time had passed. The smell, the surroundings, everything was different. Max was scared. He took a couple of steps back and hid behind Jess. Rosie stood frozen, her body tense, as if she couldn't understand what had gone wrong. That night, Jess decided to take them both home. She wasn't going to separate them again. Ever. Rosie, though weak, got into the car without protest. She lay on the back seat, watching Max with eyes full of tears. Max didn't bark, didn't whimper. He just sat quietly, observing from his little corner. At home, Jess prepared a large, comfortable space with 2 beds and warm blankets. She put out fresh water and food and carefully closed the door. Rosie lay down next to Max's bed without moving. She would look at him every so often, as if waiting for something to awaken in him. Hours passed. In the middle of the night, Max got up. He approached with hesitant steps, sniffed Rosie, who was sleeping soundly, and then, without a sound, he crawled between her paws. pressing his body against hers. And Rosie, without opening her eyes, wrapped her front leg around his body, as if she knew that her son had finally come home. In the morning, Jess came in and found them like that, one on top of the other, sleeping like two pieces of the same soul. She brought her hands to her mouth. She cried, but this time, it was from relief. Now, Max, now you're home. But what Jess didn't know was that there was still a decision to be made. One that wouldn't be easy. Because even though Rosie and Max were together, the past, the betrayal, and Shirley still had something to say. Life inside the house began to change. With Rosie and Max together, the atmosphere became warmer, softer. Every corner seemed to hold a new breath, as if the air itself was breathing differently. Max started eating with gusto again. He played with his toys and even ran around the garden, but he never strayed more than a second from his mother's side. Rosie also seemed more alive. You could see it in her eyes, in her lighter step, in the way she would sunbathe with her head held high. However, there was something she hadn't let go of, a shadow behind her gaze, something unresolved. Jess noticed it. You're still carrying that, aren't you? She said one afternoon, stroking her back. You haven't forgotten. And she was right. Rosie hadn't forgotten who separated her from her son, nor the sound of money changing hands, nor the indifference in Shirley's eyes. One morning, while Jess was taking out the bins, a neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, approached her with a bag of scones. Is that the little pup you bought off Shirley? Yes, Jess replied, a little uncomfortable. Well, she's been telling everyone you stole him, that you took advantage of her being an old woman and even took her dog. What? Jess was floored. I know, dear, you know what she's like. Happy to take the cash. And now she's spinning yarns. Jess took a deep breath. She was boiling inside. I didn't steal anyone, she said. I just reunited a mother with her puppy. Is that wrong? Mrs. Peterson lowered her voice. Not to us, it isn't, but she's saying she's going to talk to the local council. That the dogs were hers and you took them. That night, Jess watched Rosie sleep with Max. She saw them so peaceful, so complete, and the injustice of it all was too much to bear. And then, without much thought, she decided to confront Shirley. The next day, she drove to the farm. She arrived under a grey sky that threatened a storm that would never come. Rosie, who was with her, got out of the car as soon as it was parked. Seeing the entrance to the farm, she stood still. Her legs were trembling, but not from fear. It was something else, something deeper. Shirley came out when she heard the engine. Well, look what the cat dragged in. The savior of dogs. What can I do for you? Jess got out of the car. Her words were firm, but her tone was respectful. I've come to talk to you and clear some things up. Oh, really? Now you're going to come and lecture me? No, ma'am, I'm not here to fight. I just want you to understand what you did. Shirley crossed her arms. I sold a puppy. He was mine. I bred him. I fed him. What's the big deal? Jess looked her in the eyes. You didn't sell a puppy. You tore a mother away from her son. And when you saw that it was killing them both with sadness, you didn't care. Oh, please, they're animals. Rosie, who had been silent, took a step forward. Her gaze locked onto Shirley's. She didn't bark. She didn't growl. She just looked at her, long and deep, and in those eyes was something that not even humans can fake. Pain. The old woman looked down for a second. Look, Jess said, her voice softening. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to give anything back. I just want you to know that what you did had consequences. And what do you want? For me to burst into tears? No, just for you not to do it again. For you to understand that an animal's love can't be bought. And it certainly can't be broken for money. There was a long silence. Rosie came closer. She sat in front of the farm gate, sniffed it, circled a couple of times, and then walked away. She didn't want to go back in. That place was no longer her home. On the way back, Jess felt lighter. Rosie, on the other hand, seemed more resolute, as if confronting that place had closed a wound. That night, she and Max slept tangled together as always. But Rosie no longer woke up at every sound. She no longer stared at the door. She had finally understood that her son was with her, and that no one was going to take him away again. But destiny still had one more surprise in store, one that would test everything they had rebuilt, one that would arrive when they thought the pain was finally over. A couple of weeks had passed since the day Rosie faced her past. Since then, life at home seemed to flow more peacefully. Max would run around the garden, bark at the birds, and roll in the dirt. Rosie would watch him with a serene but always alert gaze. It was as if her heart had finally understood that they were safe now. But peace sometimes lasts for less time than it should. One ordinary evening, while Jess was making coffee in the kitchen, she heard a strange yelp. She ran to the garden. Max was on the ground, curled up, Breathing heavily, Rosie was circling him desperately, nudging him with her nose, licking him non-stop. "Max," Jess yelled, dropping her mug. "What's wrong, my love?" She picked him up. The puppy's body was warm, but his belly felt swollen. He was struggling to breathe. His little eyes barely opened. Jess didn't hesitate for a second. She wrapped him in a blanket and ran to the car. "Come on, Rosie," she shouted as she opened the door. Rosie jumped into the back seat without a second thought. She wasn't going to let her son go without her. Not again. The nearest 24-hour vet hospital was 40 minutes away, and every minute felt like an hour. On the way, Max cried softly. Rosie licked him constantly, as if trying to keep him awake. "Hang in there, little one, please, just hang in there," Jess said, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Rosie whined like never before. She looked at Max, then at the window, then at Jess. Her soul seemed to be breaking, piece by piece. When they arrived, the vet, a kind young man named Dr. Ramiro, saw them immediately. He took Max carefully, listened to his chest, gave him an injection, and asked them to wait in the reception area. "He's in a delicate state. It looks like an intestinal infection. Maybe something he ate. But is he going to be okay?" Jess asked, her eyes red. The doctor didn't answer right away. "We'll do everything we can." Rosie didn't move. She just stared at the door where they had taken Max. She was crying silently. Her paws were trembling. Hours passed. Jess paced back and forth, calling her mum on the phone to let her know she wouldn't be home that night. Rosie, however, didn't get up from the rug, not even for a drink of water. Finally, the doctor came out. "He'll need to be hospitalized. The infection is severe, but if he responds well tonight, he could recover. He's a tough little guy." Jess breathed a sigh of relief. But when she told Rosie, she didn't react, as if her soul had stayed in that room with her son. It was a long night. Jess didn't want to leave Rosie alone, so she slept beside her in the waiting room. Rosie didn't close her eyes. She just kept staring at the door. Every time someone passed, she'd get up, hoping to see Max, and every time it wasn't him, she'd lie back down, even sadder than before. In the early hours of the morning, the doctor came out again. He was smiling. "He's stable. He responded well to the medication. He's not out of the woods yet, but it's a huge step." Rosie shot up like a lightning bolt and ran to the door. The doctor hesitated for a moment, then let her in. What happened inside, no one would ever forget. Rosie approached the little bed where Max was sleeping, connected to an IV drip. She sniffed him, whimpered softly, and with all the care in the world, she lay down beside him. She rested her head next to his. She didn't move again. Max, as if by reflex, lifted a paw and placed it on his mother's face. It was as if they were saying, without words, "Don't go, I'm here." The next day, Max was already eating soft food. The doctor confirmed his recovery would be complete. Jess cried with joy. Rosie just closed her eyes and rested. "That's it, little one," Jess whispered, hugging them both. "Nothing and no one will ever separate you again." But they didn't yet know that something else was coming. Not a danger, not a threat, a choice, an opportunity, one that would change the course for everyone. Max came home with a renewed energy. He wasn't the same withdrawn puppy who had arrived weeks before. Now he seemed stronger, more confident, and much more playful. Although he still hadn't fully regained his weight, his spirit shone as if life had given him a second chance. Rosie didn't leave his side for a second. Even when he went to the toilet, she followed him with her eyes. They slept pressed together, ate together, and would lie in the garden for hours, watching the clouds go by. Rebecca, watching them, felt that something inside her had also healed. It was as if Max and Rosie hadn't just healed each other, they had also mended invisible wounds within her. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Jess stopped in her tracks. In a corner, near a tree, a small bundle was moving with difficulty. As she got closer, she saw it, a scruffy, mixed-breed puppy, skinny, dirty, with swollen eyes. He was alone, no collar, no mother, no way, Jess whispered, crouching down. "And what are you doing here, sweetheart?" Max approached, sniffing him. Then he looked at his mum. Rosie watched him. There was a moment of silence until Rosie bent down and licked the little one on the forehead. It was as if something inside her understood what she was seeing. This little dog had no one. No one was waiting for him. No one was coming to find him. Jess felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't planned for this. But how could she say no? She wrapped him in a t-shirt she had in her bag and took him home. The first few days were tough. The new puppy, whom Jess named Buddy, was weak. He didn't eat much and slept most of the day. But Rosie took on the role of mother without a second thought. She cared for him with the same gentleness she had shown Max. And Max, for his part, watched him with curiosity, Sometimes he'd play with his tail, other times he'd bring him his favorite toy. As if to say, I don't have much, but this is the best I've got. One night, Jess found them sleeping together. Buddy in the middle, Rosie on one side, Max on the other, like a family made of broken pieces, but complete in its own way. On social media, Jess shared their story. She wasn't looking for likes, she just wanted to show what she had learned. This isn't a story of rescued dogs. It's a story of hearts that chose to keep beating together. Even after being broken, Max lost his mum, Rosie lost her son. Today, neither of them is alone. And now, Buddy has a home too. The comments poured in, hundreds of people were moved. Some donated food, others offered to volunteer, but among all the messages, one caught her eye. It was from Shirley's granddaughter. It read, I had no idea about any of this. My nan never told me the full story. Can we talk? Jess fell silent. From the yard, Rosie looked at her as if she knew that something was about to change again. The afternoon was warm and calm when Jess received the unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang softly. From the window, she could see a young woman with her hair tied back, a backpack slung over her shoulder, and nervous eyes. Rosie, who was resting under the tree, lifted her head. Max barked once. Buddy, just waking from his nap, stayed still. Jess opened the door cautiously. Are you Shirley's granddaughter? Yes, my name's Mia. Sorry for just showing up like this. I needed to see with my own eyes what I saw in your posts. Jess nodded, not with enthusiasm, but with respect. Come in. Sitting in the living room while Rosie watched from her bed, Mia took a deep breath. My nan was always very hard. I noticed it even when I was a kid. When my grandfather died, she became even more closed off. She was never an affectionate person. Really, but I didn't know she had done this. Not like this. I don't want to judge her, Jess replied. I just wanted to do the right thing by these three. Mia looked at Rosie, who hadn't taken her eyes off her. She recognizes me, maybe, I don't know, but she's watching you as if she remembers something. Mia stood up and walked slowly towards Rosie. She crouched down carefully, and then she said it, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, I don't know if you understand, or if you even care, but I'm sorry for what they did to you, for what we took from you. Rosie approached slowly. She sniffed her. She didn't bark, didn't back away. She just closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if listening to something she already knew but needed to hear out loud. Mia sat on the floor beside her, her eyes filling with tears. My nan is sick. I don't know how much time she has left, but I want her to know that the damage she did wasn't invisible. And that I, even if it's late, want to do something different. That night, Jess thought a lot. It wasn't often you found sincere remorse, especially in families where the rule was that animals didn't have feelings. But Mia understood. She felt it. The next day, Jess called her. Do you still want to help? Yes. What are you thinking? I have an idea, but I need you to be the one to carry it out. 2 days later, Mia visited her grandmother. She brought with her some printed photos of Max, Rosie, and Buddy, all together. She also had a short video where Rosie was licking Buddy's tummy and Max was running with a ball while Jess laughed in the background. Shirley, sitting in her usual armchair, received the images without a word. She looked at them one by one. Her eyes, for the first time in a long time, grew moist. What is this? Your story, Nan, but the full story. I didn't mean to hurt them. But you did, and now you have a chance to close that chapter with dignity. And how am I supposed to do that? Come with us. Go see Rosie, look her in the eyes. You don't have to say anything. Just be there. The following weekend, Shirley arrived at Jess's house, leaning on her granddaughter's arm. She walked slowly to the garden. Rosie saw her and froze. She didn't growl, she didn't bark, but her body tensed. Max stood in front of her, as if protecting her. Buddy, confused, just watched them all. Shirley raised a trembling hand. Sorry, she murmured, her voice breaking. I didn't know what I was taking from you, until I saw what you have now. Rosie didn't come closer, but she didn't move away either. She just tilted her head, as if accepting this closure in her own way. Mia was crying. Jess was too. It was the kind of scene you can't force, that you don't seek out. It just happens. From that day on, Mia started visiting more often. She helped with their care, took the dogs for walks. She became a part of the little world that Jess, Rosie, Max, and Buddy had built. And so, without meaning to, the initial pain gave way to something bigger, a chosen family. A second chance, an ending that was finally starting to feel happy. The days began to flow with a different energy. In Jess's house, the air was no longer filled with sadness, but with something much brighter, peace. The kind of calm that doesn't come from routine, but from knowing that after so much pain, The pieces had finally fallen into place. Max had grown. He was no longer a trembling puppy, but a young, strong dog full of curiosity. He played with Buddy as if they were brothers by blood, even though their origins were different. And Rosie, well, Rosie remained the backbone of it all, the one who watched, who cared, and who, with a single flick of her ear, brought both order and tenderness. Jess, for her part, had also changed. She was no longer just the girl who had bought a puppy without knowing what came with him. Now she was the protector, the one who had learned to see differently, to pause, to listen to the wordless language of animals who had suffered too much and yet still gave love unconditionally. One afternoon, as the sky turned orange and the wind rustled the leaves of the lemon-scented gum tree in the backyard, Jess organized a small picnic in the garden. Nothing special, juice, some biscuits, a blanket on the grass. Rosie lay down beside her. Buddy was curled up asleep next to a pot plant, and Max was running around like crazy with a stick between his teeth. Who would have thought, eh? Jess said to Rosie. It all started with an unfair sale. And look where we are now. Rosie looked at her, closed her eyes, and rested her head on her leg. Jess stroked her ears with infinite tenderness. Sometimes fate has funny ways of helping us find what we really need. Just then, Mia arrived. She was carrying a bag of dog food, some homemade bread, and a small box. What's that? Jess asked. A little something I made, Mia said with a smile. For you all, for this family. She opened the box and took out a hand-carved wooden plaque. It said, "This isn't a house for dogs. It's a home for stories that survived." Jess felt a lump in her throat. Max barked once. Buddy wagged his tail, still half asleep. Rosie lifted her gaze and let out a deep sigh, as if that message belonged to her. In the following days, Jess received more messages on social media. Some asked if Buddy was up for adoption. Others wanted to help with food, medicine, or simply shared their own stories of loss and reunion. And that's when an idea sparked. What if we do something bigger? Mia asked one night over pizza and a movie. What if what happened here becomes a mission? Like a foundation? Jess said thoughtfully. Or something simpler, but real, a network of foster homes. A place where broken animals can heal. Where the Rosies and Maxes of the world can find each other again. Jess smiled. She didn't say it out loud, but inside she felt a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. And so, Second Chance Mates was born. A small project with a big name, which didn't have much money or a formal headquarters. But it had the most important thing, hearts willing to love without measure. The first few weeks were chaotic. Jess and Mia did everything. Rescuing, bathing, feeding, healing, finding homes. But Rosie was always there. As a guide, as an example. And the most beautiful thing was that Max learned too. He became the big brother to the new arrivals. He taught them not to be afraid. He played with them. He slept with the ones who cried. He shared his toys, his blanket, even his food bowl. Buddy, for his part, seemed to understand that this place had been created for him too. He was no longer the silent little puppy from before. Now he barked loudly, jumped around, and even guarded the entrance like a proper watchdog. Jess would look at him and think, if this isn't family, I don't know what is. One afternoon, Rosie sat by the window. The sun was setting softly. Max and Buddy were sleeping together. Mia was compiling an adoption list on the computer. Jess was painting a wooden sign to put up at the entrance. And Rosie, without a sound, closed her eyes. She took a deep breath and became still, as if to say, my work is done. But they didn't know yet that something even bigger was about to happen. A surprise, unexpected news, a new chapter that would test everything they had built. It was a different kind of morning, not because of the weather, or the sound of the kookaburras, or the smell of toast in the kitchen. It was different because the silence felt heavier than usual. Rosie didn't get up with the first ray of sun as she always did. Nor did she go out to the yard to supervise the newly rescued puppies. She was there, on her favorite blanket, breathing slowly, her eyes half closed. Jess noticed immediately. Rosie, she whispered, crouching beside her. Rosie opened her eyes, slow and deep, and in that gaze, Jess knew the truth without anyone having to tell her. Don't do this to me. Not today. They checked on her, offered her water, brought Max and Buddy to her. They both approached quickly. Max sniffed her, licked her ear. Buddy snuggled against her back. Rosie closed her eyes. There was no pain. There was peace. Mia called the vet, who arrived in less than half an hour. He did a quiet examination. After a few minutes, in a very soft voice, he said, "It's her heart. It's just given out. There's no suffering. She's just fading away." Jess covered her mouth with her hand. Mia bowed her head. Buddy let out a soft whine. But Max stayed right there, unmoving, pressed against his mother just like the first time. Back when he was just a puppy. No, not yet. Jess said, stroking her head. Please. The vet stood silently. No one wanted to interrupt that moment. No one had the right. Rosie opened her eyes one last time. She looked at Max, then at Jess, and finally at the sky. And with a long, deep sigh, she was gone. The silence that followed was so profound it ached in their bones. Jess couldn't speak. She just hugged Max, who stayed pressed against his mother's body for hours. Buddy cried softly, scratching at the blanket. Mia lit a candle. No one knew what to do. They only knew that something immense had just departed. They buried Rosie in the garden, under the gum tree, in the very spot where she used to lie and watch the clouds. Mia carved a stone with her own hands. They placed it on the earth with a phrase that now seemed to have even more meaning than ever. Thanks for teaching us how to love. Rest easy, Rosie. Max would spend hours by her grave. Buddy would keep him company. Sometimes they'd play for a little while, but they always came back there, as if Rosie were still telling them stories from beneath the earth. The grief was immense, but it wasn't despair. It was a kind of sadness mixed with gratitude, because they all knew that Rosie had fulfilled her mission. She had reunited with her son, saved another, opened hardened hearts, and left behind a home where others would continue to heal. One day, Jess sat in front of the tree and wrote a letter. She didn't plan to publish it, she just wanted to let out what she was feeling. Rosie, you weren't just a dog. You were a teacher, a mother, a sister, a guardian. You taught us to forgive, to keep going, to never give up. If love had a physical form, it would be you. I promise you that your home will continue to be a refuge. That your son will never be alone. And that your story will live on in every soul that this place touches. She folded it, placed it inside a jar, and buried it next to the stone. A month later, Second Chance Mates inaugurated its first official space, thanks to spontaneous donations and the help of many people touched by the story. A large yard, 2 rooms, and a garden that now had a new name, Rosie's Corner. Max became the ambassador of the place, Buddy his faithful assistant, and Jess their guardian. The story hadn't ended, it had just changed its form, as all great stories do. Several months had passed since Rosie had departed, but her absence wasn't an empty space. It was a root system. At the new Second Chance Mates Center, her spirit was still there, not as a shadow, but as a soft light that could be felt whenever a trembling puppy arrived for the first time. In every corner, there was a piece of her, in the old blankets, in the tree where they buried her, in the frayed soft toys that Max and Buddy still shared. Sometimes dogs would arrive broken, some scared, others with physical wounds, many with no trust left in humans. But it only took a few days to see how the atmosphere transformed them. This place has something, one of the volunteers would say. I don't know what it is, but it has it. Jess would smile without saying anything. She'd just look at the tree where the wind made the leaves rustle with a rhythm that sounded like a whisper, as if Rosie was still murmuring things to anyone who cared to listen. One day, a large, adult dog arrived, dark-furred, with dull eyes. He had been left tied to a fence in the rain. They named him Shadow because despite his tough appearance, he trembled like a leaf. Max approached him, sniffed his paws, then lay down beside him without a sound. From a distance, Buddy barked as if to say, "It's all right, mate, no one's going to hurt you here." And just like that, in a ritual no one ever taught but everyone knew, the cycle began again. One afternoon, Mia organized a small ceremony under the gum tree. "It's not an anniversary of anything," she said, "but I wanted us to sit and be grateful, to remember, to say that this space wouldn't be what it is without a dog who, without knowing how to read or write, taught us everything." They brought candles, photos, letters, someone sang softly, someone else cried in silence. And among all the voices, one was heard softly, Jess's. "Rosie, we promised you that your story wouldn't be forgotten. And I swear to you, today we don't just remember it, we live it, every single day." Max, hearing her name, lifted his head and let out a small howl. It wasn't sad, it was a call, an echo, and then something unplanned happened. All the dogs in the center, about 10 of them, big, small, old, and young, began to howl softly, one by one, in a chorus. It wasn't noise, it was a tribute. That night, Jess wrote the final entry in the journal she had started months ago. "Today I understood that you don't need to share blood to be family, or a language to be loved. Rosie is gone, but she remains in everything. In Max, in Buddy, in every bark that sounds strong but comes from a heart that once cried. Thank you, my friend, thank you, mother, thank you for teaching us that love doesn't die. It just changes its form." And so, under the full moon of a calm night, with the stars watching from above, Rosie became a legend, not in books, not in statues, but in something much more real, in every second of love that blossoms when someone decides not to give up. Because some stories start with pain, but end up becoming a beacon. And this was one of them. And that's how this story ends. A story that began with a painful separation but ended up uniting souls that should never have been broken. Now I ask you, the one on the other side of the screen, what part of this story touched you the most? From what corner of the world are you watching? I would love to read your answers in the comments. I really would, because every shared story brings us all a little closer. And before I go, I want to leave you with a thought. If you ever have the chance to adopt, do it. Don't shop, rescue, don't ignore, care, don't hurt, love, because animals don't need much to be happy. They just need respect, affection, and a second chance. If this story reached your heart, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way, we can keep sharing more stories that heal, that teach, and that make us better people. Thanks for being here. See you in the next video. And remember, where there is love, there is always hope.